Welcome to the Stash Cast, where innovation meets real estate. Let's dive in.
Andrew, thank you so much for coming to join me again today. I really appreciate it.
Good to be back.
So for anybody that doesn't know Andrew, I'll call you a prolific founder and then VC in the prop tech space.
I like to start for those of you who missed the last podcast, and I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. On the one hand, that means more people are getting to know me. On the other hand, wait, why didn't you listen to the first one? Go back, read the other one first.
Yeah.
But it's not that kind of, this is not like a sequel where if you missed the first one, you don't know what's happening. So I've only done 2 prior startups, actually. Neither of them were in prop tech, but I have been investing in startups for over almost 20 years now. And I've done about 70 investments in general, of which over 30 of them have been in prop tech or construction tech. And that's really where I hang my hat these days. So I'll take the prolific on the investor side if you're still offering it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for anybody that didn't listen last time, we went through his journey and then the challenges with construction and adopting new technology similar to challenges in commercial real estate. You had some advice for startups and founders on pitch strategy, things that make you roll your eyes, or I think use the phrase throw up in your mouth a little bit. That was a great time. That's why I wanted to have you back. But today you're here because like you said, you've invested in 70, and I think you've coached over 100. You're here because you've decided to write a book. For anybody that's watching it, you can see the cover art there. So I guess why the book and why now?
Yeah. So this is us diving deep into the part about how not to screw up your startup. But let's go even broader. The book is basically soup to nuts, everything from I'm thinking about starting a startup to closing your first round. The reason I wrote it actually goes back decades. When I was in business school, I read a book called The Goal. The Goal was a story about a guy who was tasked to turn around a printing plant in the Midwest, didn't know what the hell he was doing. He meets this consultant on an airplane who guides him through the process. And in the course of this book, it's actually everything you need to do as a general manager, the strategy and the operations of running a business. But it was told in the form of a novel. And there was one huge plot hole, right? He met this consultant on an airplane there. The consultant never invoiced him, not for a penny. So that was totally unbelievable. But other than that, it rang 1000% true. And it was a much, much more memorable way to learn what's otherwise a dry topic. When I think back to the textbooks I've read over the years in college, business school, I remember none of them except for The Goal. Fast forward 20 years after that, running DreamIt's accelerator programs. And at the time, DreamIt was an early stage, pre-revenue, traditional sit your butt in a chair for 3 months and we'll bring you pizza, speakers, beer, demo day at the end type program. And I was creating curriculum soup to nuts for them, usually by bringing in speakers, but later by creating our own curriculum to help them through every step of that process. And somewhere along the way, it occurred to me like, wow, how much cooler would it be to tell this story in the form of a novel, like The Goal, but for the startup journey? But then I was 1000% busy with other stuff. And I just stayed in the back of my mind for decades. And then after COVID, when things were up in the air and I had 6 or 7 different projects going on, it finally occurred to me, if I didn't write it now, I never was going to.
Yeah. So I guess you blocked off time and just sat and wrote for...
No, that would be the right way to do it. That's how people with discipline write books. I didn't go that route. It's actually funny. You know those guys on like the subway cars that they're muttering to themselves and you think they're a little crazy, so you give them room?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was me. Yeah, here's the irony of it. The startup in the book is a speech to text startup in the call recording space. And it's actually a simplified version of a startup that I've been developing with a couple of friends on the side. But what makes it really meta-ish, lowercase m, is that I wrote about 80% of it dictating into my phone.
I love that.
Like 3 minutes at a time on the train, dictating speech to text into Google Docs. And then an hour or two later looking at, what did I actually mean by this? That's how I wrote most of the book.
So were you able to keep like a cohesive narrative the whole time?
Read the book. You tell me if it's cohesive. Now, I'll tell you, I had a couple of advantages. All right. So number one, I did spend about 20 minutes in the beginning outlining everything.
Okay.
But it was super easy for me to do that because the outline was all the curriculum that I'd lined up for the
Right.
startups back when Dream It was this early stage program. And even when we were a later stage program, which I think we talked about a little in the last interview. So, hey guys, you can go watch the other one when we're done here. Even when we were later stage and the people were, a little bit more advanced, it was still like, yeah, like Stash, you're really great at customer discovery, but you don't know fuck all about raising a round. That's two F bombs. I think we're already at par with the
That's
last.
all right.
That's cool. I'll pace myself. But you don't know anything about raising a round. So here, you should read the deck about how to find investors. So I knew all of what I wanted to say. I knew roughly the order I wanted to say it in, but I had three challenges. Number one was, how do I tell this as a story rather than two guys looking at a deck in a WeWork conference room? And so I needed to change it so that, for instance, I could tell you like 17 different, probably more revenue models that might apply to any start, not just in construction tech or prop tech, throughout the different industries. But I ended up having that be a conversation between the founder and his son on the New York City subway, which starts casually with his son saying, Dad, if I owned the subway, I'd be rich. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, everyone takes the subway, 4 stops to your school. And his son's like, that's ridiculous, Dad. Like, you should pay by the stop. And then that evolves into a discussion of a bunch of different revenue models. So making everything actually part of a story rather than me just telling people, that was challenge number one. Challenge number two is just length, right? I've written about 70 articles, 70 investments, 70 articles. That's an interesting coincidence. But I've run about 70 articles over the years, and they're all about 500 to 800 words long, with rare exceptions, because that's what people have the patience to read. And that's what the publications I placed them in wanted. So to go from 800 words to 200 plus pages, I didn't even know if I could do it. So I didn't really tell anyone I was doing this until it was about 100 pages in anyway. Mm. And the third thing is, and this was maybe a little more subtle, is when I write those articles, it's all my voice. I think it's an interesting voice, not worth saying, worth a damn, but for reading, it's entertaining. But in a novel, you got a bunch of different characters from different perspectives. So they shouldn't all sound like me. I came up with this hack where every one of the characters is actually somebody I know and I've worked with. The angel investor that's the mentor is largely me and this other guy who's now deceased, unfortunately, John Eason, who was one of the OG of New York angel investing. And after him, I've named the main character, the angel investor, Jason. But that's one example. So every time I run a character through the script, so to speak, I'm thinking like, how would it sound if John said this? Or how would it sound if this person I have in mind said this, like the entrepreneur? And just by writing down the way I envision them saying it, I think I've come up with a book where all the characters have authentic voices.
Honestly, that sounds like the best way to do it is that you are modeling off of people or experiences that you, and even just you writing the outline of it. You've already done it. And so now let's just create the outline. I think it's genius the way that you're doing it. I've actually been thinking about and have like a brokerage course in the works because it's like I've been compiling information and practicing brokerage for almost 20 years now. So I should know what I'm talking about. And
I think that's actually a brilliant idea. And if we'll go a little sideways for a bit, I'll tell you the original way we did this when we were an early stage accelerator, back when I was still with Dream It, back when Dream It was still pre-revenue and all that, we used to bring in speakers to talk about the different topics. That was pretty cool because they got to meet Fred Wilson, and that's awesome. But when you think about it, to the extent that an accelerator is also almost like an education institution, right? There's a part of it that is educating the startups. It's the absolute backwards way to try to run a course. And here's the irony. I now am an adjunct professor of entrepreneurship. I want to bring in guest speakers, but I'm painfully aware of the fact that when you bring in a guest speaker, whether it's to an accelerator or to your course, you don't control the content. You're not sure you're going to cover it as effectively or comprehensively as you want to. And you're at the mercy of their schedule. So you can't cover it necessarily in the order that makes sense. When Fred was available, we were doing this for a while. And then at one point we said, hey guys, why are we doing this? Collectively, we know all this. So instead of bringing in people, why don't we just sit down, bite the bullet, write the curriculum once and deliver it in the same way throughout all the accelerator programs, across geography, across times. It could be different people giving it from the same deck. It doesn't matter. At least there'll be a consistent and a consistently quality delivery of the material. And to the extent that you could, when you bring on new commercial real estate agents, and you want them to do it a certain way that you have learned over painful experience is better than other ways, why not do it? It's almost, you train it once and you're done. Like, why would you want to do it one off every time a new person comes in when you can just record it, put the deck together, then maybe deliver it to 20 people when they're onboarded? It just makes so much more sense. So yeah, go do it. I think it's great.
The Stashcast is brought to you by Needle. What if you could use data and analytics to predict real estate transactions? With Needle, you can. Check it out at needle.us to learn more.
And I think the other thing that it helps you do is I've heard before, and I think I've even experienced it, where if you have to teach a subject, you have to master it in order to then tell people what it is. It increases or encourages you to just get better at your own craft. And I'm sure for you as well as a leader.
Back in college, partly as a way to make a couple of bucks, I agreed to be like a tutor. So I had just taken like Micro 101 my freshman year. And then my sophomore year, I'm like making a couple of bucks tutoring other students in micro. And like, you don't realize what you know is a little shaky until you're trying to explain it to someone else.
Yeah.
And to come full circle, my daughter's a freshman at Michigan right now, and she just finished taking micro, and I just had to go through it again with her. So now you don't realize how much you've forgotten in 30 years until you actually try to go over it again with your kid. But yeah, it'll show you gaps in your knowledge. It'll also show you the things that you're good at, but don't know why you're good at. There are a lot of salespeople in particular, even as really great salespeople, but you ask them to explain it to somebody new, and they
Can't do it.
It's a different skill.
Yeah. I am not afraid of cold calling. That's how I built my whole career. That's essentially how you and I first got connected. Whereas some people are terrified of it. And I can give you some tips about how to do it, but I can't help you overcome that fear. So that is a challenge.
I hated it. While I was a consultant back in my first job at a business school, he was like, I can go to the dentist or I can make phone calls. It was probably even little judgy. But if you're trying to ask somebody out, like when you're a teen, you're so nervous. What if they say no? It's going to be embarrassing. And then you ask them out, and then they say no, and it's embarrassing. But then a day later, that wasn't so bad. Well, the only way to get over fear of cold calling, you just freaking do it.
You just got to do it.
You know what happens? Someone hangs up on you. They hung up on you. You go to the next number. And once you realize that's not so bad. Once you realize that, like, actually, some of them will talk to you.
Right.
Some of them will kind of give you the information you needed, or might be interested in talking business. You're like, why was I so afraid in the first place? But you got to do it. It's a huge skill to learn.
Yeah. I found the best way to do it was to come with something of value. Hey, if you could help me, especially when I was brand new, I was doing rent surveys, and it's, hey, Andrew, if you'd be kind enough to help me out, I just have a couple of questions for you. I'd be happy to share a copy with you. And that way I would get their email address and I would get their information. And then you have to follow through and give them the report.
Yep. For us, it was benchmarking. Anyone who participates get a copy. But you reminded me actually just two things, one of which is in the book and one is not. So shame on me for the second one.
It'll be in the revised version.
See if I can remember both of them. So number one, and this is when it's not in the book, right? I tell all my founders that when they're this is in the book, you're not raising money all of a sudden. Like all the time, you should be talking to investors. The difference between a CEO who is quote unquote fundraising and a CEO that is not quote unquote fundraising is whether they're spending 20% of their time fundraising and 80% of their time working on their business, or 80% of their time fundraising and 20% on their business, but you're always talking to investors.
Yeah.
The way to make your call the one they want to hear, that could be for sales, that could be for fundraising, that could be for anything. You're looking for a job. You just always be thinking like, what can I bring to the table at the beginning of the call? And it could be as simple as, hey, Stash, I heard you guys were acquired by Cush Wake. That's awesome. How can I help? Or, hey, I saw this report about data centers in upstate New York. And I know we spoke about data centers, last month. I thought you'd find it interesting. You become the call they want to take.
Yeah. It's like in brokerage, you become like a bastion of information. You're an information broker, and then the transactions are secondary. versus
90% of
transactions
battle
first.
is
Yeah.
they think about you.
Yeah.
They think about you first. And then if something comes across the table, that stash guy, every time I speak to him, he brings me something. I think he'd be interested in this for a change.
Yeah.
The thing that was actually in the book is cold calls. So it's ironic. I have a healthy respect for cold calls, but I loathe with a passion, like bordering on apocalyptic, the cold email to investors. And it's interesting in a way, and it's part because most startups just do it badly, but it's also conceptually a problem. And this I do get into the book, right? Even before AI made it absurdly easy to do it. And even before we had drip campaigns where, like you didn't answer, I'm following up on this. There was a kind of founder who thought that they could just queue up 1,000 emails just randomly to anyone who was an investor and be like, hey, I have this new Guava based loop. I invest in prop tech. I invest in construction tech. Why are you sending it to me? Because you
Right.
did zero work. You pulled the list, you spammed everybody. So the reasons that it's, and I'm not alone on this, VCs are so passionately against it, is it's a way for the startup to be lazy and steal time from me. No, you figure out whether you should give me money. Now, cold call is good, but you do your homework before you do a cold call. If you call a sales prospect before you picked up that phone, you know what kind of buildings they're in, right? You know
Yeah.
what their footprint is now. You've got a thesis maybe as to how is their footprint growing or is it shrinking? Ideally, you want to know if their current lease is up in a year or less, right? You are doing all your homework so that when you pick up the phone, you're telegraphing to me in the first minute or two that, you've got something that's valuable to me. You've done your homework. You're respectful of my time. I think that a lot of startups send to a VC telegraphs in the first sentence or two. They've done none of that. And
Yes.
you want a $50,000 enterprise sales contract and you do all that work up front. Awesome. You want a $5 million check and you do zero work. Not awesome.
Yeah.
Now, the flip side is we are, as investors, we're super connected. We're practically on every social media platform known to man. Where I'm only on some of them to ruin it for my kids, but for some of them, I'm on for my own purposes. You name it. Clubhouse came. Every startup's on Clubhouse. Not so good anymore. Okay, we're out, but we're on it. So we should be relatively easy to find. If you can't get a warm trip to me, you say, hey, Stash, I see Andrew. I see that he's invested in like these 3 startups, A, B, and C, that are all in the same space as the startup I'm working on. So I think Andrew would be interested in my startup. Can you make an intro? If you can't find that connector, I wonder how good you're going to be at sales. I should be leveraging those assets. And I covered this in the last couple of chapters of the book, right? When it comes to the startup, your first, second, and third instinct should be warm introductions and making those intros as easy as possible for the connector and for the person that you want to connect with if you want to get through. But cold emails, cold calls and that skill, it's definitely something that's critical for the startup founders toolkit, just not for fundraising.
Yeah. I'm just pondering on this.
Some people will fight me on this. There are people who I can name a couple and they swear by something. I know, Andrew, you hate it. And I know the results there's low response rates to it, but I send it to 100 times as many people. It evens out. I don't think so. Of all the cold emails, I've received probably 10,000 in my career. The number that I've actually engaged with, forget about invested in, the ones I've engaged with have rounded up to 0. So I don't think that's the case. I haven't seen any stats on it. I certainly believe the more, it was like an arms race, the more AI makes this kind of outreach supposedly easy, the less the close rate's going to be. But I don't have stats on it. I could be wrong.
I get pitch slapped all the time where they just dig in and immediately, "Hey, we do this and this." It's like, you're just assuming that I want or need your solution, whatever it is.
You're not even spending any time. Their entire email starts with, we want to tell you this. When a good sales email, cold or otherwise, starts with, I understand that you need something like this. Right?
Yeah.
Now, if you don't know, you ask. You're like, hey, I see that you're working for not good Schweik, and I see what your role is. Is blank a big problem? Now, ideally, you already know that. But worst case scenario, at least start with some awareness of the fact that, like, the guy on the other end of the phone or computer screen, is a human being with certain needs, and like you haven't even asked them what they want yet.
Right. Yeah. You try and ask good questions. I guess this is a tip for cold calling and pitching in general, but Good questions are so much better than let me tell you what I do and you figure out if you want to engage.
Yeah.
Just leave me alone. I just end up responding back saying, don't forget to subscribe to my Substack.
I have a plugin that does something similar to that to Chrome. And when I get it, usually over LinkedIn, but sometimes just email, I have a couple of keystrokes and the phrase it fills in is, oh, thanks so much for reaching out to me. But I have to admit, I'm having trouble seeing exactly how your venture fits into my investment thesis. Could you connect the dots for me? The actual keystrokes that trigger that is the word go away. It's my way of saying, you've done zero work.
Yeah.
Before I do any work reading your email, go back and do some work first.
Yeah. Leave me alone.
The first sentence on my LinkedIn profile says what I did. It's just there. I'm not hiding it. The second sentence says, don't fricking send me email. Here's my email address. So clearly you haven't read that part, but okay, that's below the fold, maybe. But the first sentence, my description says what I do. So do a minimum amount of homework.
I'm very easily available and findable. And people are like, what's your email address? If you can't figure that out, you've got bigger problems, my friend.
Yeah. There are a lot of people hiding their email addresses.
No, it's true. Back to the book. Did you put it on Audible? Do you have an audio version?
Yeah. So that brings up a couple of other topics. So I actually went the route of a traditional publisher rather than self-publishing. And I had a couple of reasons for it. The main of which is that the time is limited and there's so many things that I want to do. So for me to invest that time in writing the book, even though it was 3 minutes here or there on the subway looking like a crazy person, I wanted to have some like measurable objectives. Like one of the measurable objectives that are indicative of whether or not I'm doing something that's actually meaningful to people, who actually changes their lives in a good way. And getting a publisher, getting past that first screen where a reputable publisher will put their name behind it was worth it to me, even to the extent that I probably gave up 80% of the money. It's a 20-80 split instead of an 80-20 split kind of situation.
Yeah.
And actually by total chance, like I thought it was going to, like and it's in the book and I tell my founders face to face, when you're looking to raise money, you got to be starting with about 100 prospects, 100 people who have invested in arguably your area, however you describe it at your stage. If you start from there, maybe you'll come out with a couple of people who will give you term sheets at the same time. And that's really how you get the best value. You don't negotiate one-on-one with the VC. You only negotiate when you have multiple VCs offering you term sheets. So there's an art to getting whatever term sheets your startup might possibly be able to get. There's an art to getting them at the same time because it's useless if you get one term sheet and you have 2 weeks to say yes or no to it, and the next term sheet doesn't come in for 3 weeks.
What it reminds me of is how we run our deals.
So you want to have bidders.
In the world of investment sales, we put it out for 30, 45 days, and we say, here's our call for offers date. We'll take your offer before, but we're not going to respond to it until we've had our call for offers date. And as you're speaking, it's the exact same thing, because you want to be able to create competition versus the typical model of some of my competitors. Oh yeah, we've got multiple offers we're working with, and there's just one at the table.
Yeah, number one, the mental model of enterprise sales is pretty applicable to a lot of things. Like raising money for your startup is almost exactly the same thing, except instead of selling your product, you're selling pieces of your company. If you come at fundraising with the mindset of this is 6-figure, 7-figure enterprise sales, you're not going to be that far off. You certainly won't spray and pray. So that puts your head and shoulders above a lot of other people. And then also, if you think about it, I want to be able to, get enough people bidding at the same time so I have legit competition, but also I want to avoid a situation where maybe they just collude. Because VCs, we talk a lot. So if I know that a certain other fund is might be leading your round, right? You may talk and be like, hey, why don't we co-lead it? And as a VC, you don't want that. You want us competing blindly against each other. Now, once I put a term sheet down, and once you accept my term sheet, rather than you go out and try to get other term sheets in that 2-week period that you have to play with, but once you've accepted a term sheet, then, the whole situation changes to it. But how you handle that dance to get it so that you get multiple term sheets around the same time, or at least to the point where there's enough of them on the rim that getting one term sheet tips the ball over, or your help can tip the ball over into the hoop. You actually do legit have 2 or 3 or 4 term sheets in hand to play with. You're not bluffing. which is
Right.
really dangerous. Then how you play that out. And then after that, once you've accepted one, how you try to get the people that you said no to, hey, why don't you follow?
It's about reframing it. Reframing as you're speaking, it helped me realize, yeah, you're selling pieces of your company also with the hopes that, and I think we talked about this last time, but in my opinion, this is why I started the podcast, was to be able to have conversations with guys like you, but you want somebody who's not necessarily just going to say, here's a check, call me when you have a liquidity event. You want somebody that's going to invest in you, that's going to say, and here's the investment. And then, hey, here's how we're going to make this a bigger and better thing together.
Yeah. So we want a value added investor or someone who's more than money. Don't get me wrong. There are times where just give me a check and go away for 4 years. Not a horrible thing.
Sure.
There, that's better than some kind of investors where they're always on your shoulder and are we exiting yet? I'm like, dude, I'm a startup. This is an 8-9 year journey. Understanding who your investors are critical. So if you do have your choice of a couple of term sheets, and I do go through the book, like how you can compare those apples to oranges that are different term sheets. But one of the intangibles is I'm getting in bed with somebody for a decade, maybe a little less, but probably a decade. Every time I invest in a startup, I want to know what kind of people they are. And they want to know what kind of people I am. So everyone that you talk to, the VCs, one or two exceptions who are just dicks through and through, will all seem nice until we take the check. And we'll all definitely be nice when you're doing well. But what really separates the VCs who are genuinely above and beyond are how they treat the startups that are struggling. There's a point in our lives where we look at our portfolio and we can pour our time and attention into the winners who maybe don't need us because they're doing awesome. We can pour our time and attention into finding new startups to invest in, which are no more lottery tickets. Or we can put time and attention into helping the startups that are struggling. A purely self-interested VC is looking at, I have these many hours to spend. Here's the chance I can turn this startup around and still make that a big win for my fund versus I'll put that time into finding other startups and getting new lottery tickets. And there's a tipping point where it's like, we've already tried enough things. The odds that they're going to turn it around are lower. And if they do turn it around, it's been so long that the ROI is not that much different than a zero on this one anyway. So a rational VC kind of stops returning calls and ghosts, but like starts with the minimum amount of upkeep. So I tell my founders to use the Wayback Machine is Internet Archive. Also, it's like websites throughout time. So I say, use the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine, to look at that VC's portfolio page a year, 2, 3, and 4 years ago, and look for the logos that have disappeared, right? And logos that have disappeared, maybe they had a name change, they had an exit, but a lot of times it's a company that went out of business. And see if you can find the founders of those companies and ask them, what was it like to work with Andrew when your company was going under? Was he still helpful? What kind of advice did he give you? And that'll give you the measure of a VC more than anything else. This only applies if you have multiple term sheets to choose from that are roughly in the same place. If you only have one, you got to take what you can get or shut down. But if you do get to that point, like there are ways to make sure you're basically getting into bed with good people.
Yeah. I think that goes for really if you're going to be taking investor capital, I'm thinking about apartment
Worse
deals.
than it is to get rid of an investor in some cases. Easier to get a divorce than it is to get somebody off your cap table.
I can imagine.
Anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it's a different relationship, isn't it?
It's an explicitly contractual relationship where a lot of the terms are designed by lawyers very carefully. Preserve the rights of the investors, I guess would be a nice way to put it.
Very diplomatic.
Very lawyerly.
You just because I listen to Audible all the time. And for the things that I can't listen to Audible, I just subscribe to speech.
I will give you the answer to that. That was the original question.
Yeah.
So I went for the traditional publisher route. So I have a contract with the publisher who, by total and complete chance, thinking that I was going to need to talk to 100 or 200 publishers and agents before I found one, but I stumbled on the same firm that publishes The Goal.
Oh,
Inspired it. So I went there. I got that. That was massive for me anyway, validation that this was something that was interesting and meaningful to the world at large. So in my contract with them, they do have the rights to put an audiobook together.
I see.
The book itself, it's available for pre-order now. Now is, for those of you who are listening to this later, now is late April. And so it will be in print May 15. And for those of you reading for much later, that's May 15, 2025. So if you're listening to this much later, but that's when it went into print. But the timeline for them will be, let's see what happens once it actually comes out in print and see how well it's doing before they devote the resources to creating an audible version.
The concept reminds me a lot of the E-Myth and the E-Myth Revised.
Tell
Are
me
you
about that.
Oh, it's a great book. So it tells the story of this woman. She has a pie shop. She's a pie maker, and she's working day and night, 14-hour days, doing everything. And it says, you need to be able to scale what you're doing. And it talks a lot about the franchise model. And I think it was inspired by McDonald's. They talk a lot about McDonald's and how they've created a really good franchise model. It's probably a little dated at this point. If you create a franchise model, you can have people just implement this and do this for you on your behalf so that you can decide to open 10 more pie shops, or you can just get some sanity back and your own time back. And so that's what it focuses. And then they've iterated off of that. I think they've done one for real estate agents and one for real estate investors too, maybe. The E-Myth, and then it's called the E-Myth Revised. But it's
You're
a
coming
similar
back to the
concept.
power of stories as a way
Yeah.
to convey a lesson. Like they could have just made it a textbook about franchising, right? They embedded those lessons in the story of Sally and her pie shop. So you remember that, whereas you don't remember any of the textbooks you read in college, do you?
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I do the podcast as well. I'm always just so curious about people's stories and like, how did you get here? What brought you to this position in life? And then you can hear the story and absorb it versus, oh, this is what happened and this is what happened. It's always a fascinating thing to me.
It's actually a two-edged sword in some ways, right? Because the power of a story is so strong. You hear a story and it's our tendency to generalize from it and take lessons. So you get all these little less now that he's been dead for a while, but like Steve Jobs, like biographies, and all the would-be founders like, oh my God, Steve Jobs brushed his teeth with his left hand. So I'm going to brush my teeth with my left hand. That's going to be successful. The Theranos women wore only black turtlenecks.
Yeah.
But that's a sample size of one at the end of the day. And you don't know whether or not like signing one thing that Steve Jobs did was good, bad, or neutral. In fact, I'll give you an example I give sometime. There's the story about how the iPhone was ready to ship and he comes in one day and he goes, look at this. And there's like scratches and crack marks all over his screen. What happens? Like, I put it in my pocket, my keys. We can't ship it like this. We have to fix it. And he throws the shipping, the delivery schedule back by 6 months or a year when they develop Gorilla Glass. And that's told as an example about how you have to have like fanatical dedication to like the quality of the product. The one problem with that story is it's probably the wrong thing to have done. Because if you think about it, how many times have you cracked your phone screen since you've had a smartphone?
Yeah, a bunch.
And did you run out right away and get it fixed? Or did you limp on sometimes for days because you couldn't be parted with that phone for the hour it took to fix the screen? Yeah. You know what that tells me? That tells me the product is so potent that no one would have cared. And by the way, if you put your phone in your pocket with your keys and it got scratched, would you blame the manufacturer or your own stupidity for putting sharp metal next to glass?
You'd be like, oh, what a dumbass. Why did I do
So
that?
the example that they give, when I first hear about it, I was like, oh, it's a great example of like quality. And when you think about it, like you dig a little deep, you're like, that was dumb, right? He cost hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't know how much by delaying the launch. And it could have been with version 1.0 when he fixed it.
Sure.
When you think about it that way, that's the danger of story, taking lessons from story. And the reason that I'm good with how I wrote this book, and then the reason that the goal before it was powerful, and it's its 40th printing at this point or more, is that it started out as the agglomeration of many success stories, what worked and what didn't work, right? All the things that I put in the book, like when I'm talking about how you do customer discovery, right? Like how you do a customer discovery meeting. Like in this case, the founder, he's thinking that he's going to target realtors, real estate agents. because they're always on the go. They're on their phone all the time. They don't have time to take a pen and start writing stuff down in many cases. But he thinks they're a good initial customer, ICP, initial customer profile. So one of the things that I've seen that worked very well over the years, I write into the book, is him talking to a friend of his wife. That's often you get your first interviews are often friends of friends, who is a real estate agent. And he takes index cards with images or printouts of a mock-up of the screen, puts it in front of her and says, listen, I'm not going to say anything. You're going to pretend this is the app. You're going to touch it as if it's the phone. And I'm not going to be there when a user is using my app, so I can't say anything. I'm just going to respond and I'll give you new screens. But I need you as the customer, I just need you to verbalize what you're thinking, right? And she'll be like, I don't really know what to click now. He doesn't say anything. He can't help her because he's not there. He just wants to know what she'll end up pushing if she's confused. So that kind of customer discovery approach for apps in particular, but for websites too, is a tried and true method or a hack, for lack of a better word, to test your customer market fit, to test whether your initial version 1.0 of the product, before you've even coded a single line, does what it needs to do for who you think your customer are. And then I just put it in the story, rather than it be like the anecdote of what worked, but then could be a mix of stuff that were totally irrelevant. So I find that like a story is powerful. And when it's the summation of a lot of wisdom that's come together from a lot of data points, it's powerful in the right direction. But when it's a single anecdote that's so memorable, it becomes dangerous because it's a mix of stuff that is really important and a lot of stuff that just isn't, or may even be counterproductive.
Yeah, that's why anecdotal evidence is oftentimes thrown out, even though it might be true. Like you need the data behind it to back it up, which is frustrating if you just have, hey, this works because of this. And it's like, all right, well, show me the data behind that time and again. But yeah, you're right. Is it an electronic version so I can plug it into Speechify and have it read it to me?
So I think there's 3 versions of the book right now. There's the paperback, which has this lovely cover, which I actually got one of the designers for my very first investment that I made when I took over the Dream at New York Accelerator program. And there's a story behind this. Or you could buy for $180, you can buy the library copy, hardcover. Don't do that. I wouldn't do that. My mom won't buy that one. My publisher insists on putting that on the Amazon page, and other authors that have been like, they won't take it off. Just link to the paperback version for other people. And I believe there's a Kindle version as well.
Okay. Yeah, you can do that then.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
What's the story behind the cover art there?
I don't know if you can see, it's a little tough to see. Let me see if I can share the full screen while we're talking. So I like visual puns, or I like puns in general, right? So one of the things, if you can see the subtitle there, it says it's a novel approach to startups. It's a novel, it's new, whatever. I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What can I say? I'm a geek that way. The other thing is navigating the startup world. It's like a maze, right? You're wending your way through it. And if I can ever get the full version of the book up here, the cover.
I saw it. It's on your website. I saw it earlier.
There's a picture of a guy in the front of the page with a chainsaw, and he's literally hacking his way through the maze.
I love
is
it.
very much the attitude that you have to have as a founder. If you want to keep doing things the way everyone else has done it before, you're not really building anything. You're not really changing anything. You're not even making the world better for anybody. So you have to think of yourself as hacking your way purposefully in the right direction to get to your goal. Okay. Can you see the image of the book?
Yep.
Okay. So there's your guy with this chainsaw hacking his way through. A couple other things, and this is not true. This maze, that motif wraps around the back of the book.
Oh, cool.
And the reason I did that, I went into Barnes and Noble one day, and I went into the business section, stood back about 15 feet, let my eyes glaze over a little bit. And I wanted to look for 2 things. What colors are there and what colors are not? Shockingly, that shade of green is underrepresented in the business section. And the other thing is,
Is it a lot of blues and blacks, maybe some reds?
Blacks, whites, some reds, solid colors. They're very big on either pictures of the author or a visual pun, right? So it's like the sales hook will have a picture of a fish hook with $100 in water bills on it, or the power of networks. It'll look like a light bulb, only instead of the top part, it's a dandelion blowing away. So this was a very different look from it. And also all of their spines were a single solid color with words on it. So I had the maze going over it. So it just stands out just by looking at it. So that was purposeful. Here is the importance of reading the fine print. So I'm going to show you a couple of things. I had an in-person event about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I think it would really be cool. Really be cool if I could leave a bookmark on the chair. Right. So the bookmark has a picture of the book. It says, turn it over for some testimonials. It's got the QR code to buy it. Then turn it over. You can see the other side right here. You can see like a nice testimonial from David Brown, one of the founders of Techstars, a nice testimonial from Avi Savar, who's one of my bosses who ran Dream It for a couple of years. Nice picture of the dude hacking his way free. And then when it comes to me in the mail, this is what they are, mini bookmarks, right? These are, I got like 3 inches tall.
They're adorable.
If you have a magnifying glass, you can read it.
Right.
So,
Details in the fine print.
Yeah, we all make mistakes.
Yeah. The road to
But
hell is paved with the best intentions.
when I see you next, I'm happy to give you a few of them and it'll be a collector's item.
Yeah, I think so. It sounds, unless you're a person that just really thrives on reading textbooks, it sounds like this should be required reading for any startup founder or somebody who's thinking about getting into building a startup.
And this is actually where maybe one of the overlaps with the audience that we normally have. There's a lot of people in the real estate world and the construction world, because of the inefficiencies, because we've resisted innovation for so long, there are a lot of people in there. It's like, I have this idea, right? We should do this. Why should it be so hard to do that? And they're thinking about what it would be like to kind of leave their job. But again, life is not like the Steve Jobs biopics. It's both more interesting in some ways and a hell of a lot more boring and lonely than what makes it onto screen. For those kinds of people, I wanted to convey to them really what the texture and feeling of being an entrepreneur is like in reality. Is this the kind of thing day to day that you will thrive on, or at least stomach? Or is it the kind of thing where it's, oh my God, I can't believe I left a real job for this? And for the people who are actually doing it already, like I wanted to give them in a concise and memorable way an opportunity to not make all the mistakes I made on my first 2 startups, or that I've seen a lot of my portfolio companies make over the years. And then even they can give it to their mom. So their mom stops asking why they don't want to just go to law school already. My mom thought I should go to law school until I was, God, I think I was like 28. I was a consultant for 4 years already. And they were visiting me in Chicago. And I said, just wait, my flight gets in a half hour after yours. We'll share a ride in. The town car company didn't have any town cars. So they sent a limo. So that was the last time my mom asked me if I wanted to go back to law school. But yeah, give it to your mom. Then she'll know exactly what you do.
Yeah. So I assume then it's got the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. There's a
Yeah.
lot of that.
But there's the truth. He starts off as a solo founder, right? So the mentor has like a real heart to heart about why he doesn't know why that's probably going to be a non-starter for a lot of people. He brings in a guy that he thinks would be a great co-founder, meets the mentor, they talk it through, and it turns out like, I love the guy for 3 years from now, but he's not a co-founder.
Mm.
And then he meets like the actual co-founder at a different accelerator. And then when he meets her, he realizes, oh, that's why she's the right co-founder and the other person isn't. So those things, the reality of that, I hope I get across pretty well. Just the Cobra is running out, so pretty soon I'll have no health care, and I have no money in the bank account, and I have to break that news to 10 people who work for me. That isn't in the book, but that's very real too.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Chasing
Chasing
a
a dream.
kind of thing.
It must be like the adrenaline rush. I've got a bunch of things. I've got the podcast, I've got brokerage, I've got Needle, and I'm doing a development deal. So I just like all sorts of, they're all on path. They're all related in some aspect, but I like to have a bunch of different things going on. I get bored if there's only one thing.
So when you're at a startup, you give up some of that because you have to be monomaniacally focused on one thing 120% of your time. And the highs are high and the lows are low. I remember for my first startup when our main competitor went out of business, like the equivalent of going out of business a month before Christmas. It was like right before the summer camps seasons were starting, and we just picked up a ton of business, and that was awesome. And I also remember when on 9/11, one of the casualties in World Trade Center was the VC fund that had given us a term sheet. Term sheet
Yeah.
quite literally vaporized. Like our
Yeah.
contact, thankfully, wasn't there at the time, so he was alive, but the VC fund ceased to exist. And going a year without salary was not the high point of doing a startup.
No.
Highs are highs and the lows are lows, and you're very consciously putting a lot of your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
It's a different mentality than being an employee or being an independent consultant with a bunch of different projects.
The startup world is very similar to brokerage
But
because
you eat what you kill.
100%. And you're at the whims of the market too. With interest rates shooting up, you have deals that just, they don't pencil, meaning that you can't sell them for anywhere close to what the owner put in their pro forma for an exit price. And so they're like, I'll just hold it unless I have to sell it.
I'll tell you, in some ways, the be a professional startup, as opposed to the tech startup, is a special case, right? Tech startups, even ones that are pretty cash efficient, like you got to put a decent amount of money and time into it before you have something to sell. But if you are a consultant or a broker of some sort, whether it's a real estate broker or anything else, you can usually hang up a shingle for relatively little upfront cost. To leave, and I'm just going to use a consulting or a law firm or an accounting firm as an
Yeah.
example, to take out the real estate, the idiosyncrasies of the real estate market. You got a couple of clients that are willing to run with you, and you can set up on your own. You can actually get a pretty smooth path into being a professional startup of that sort. On the flip side, when things dry up, it's just you and whatever you have saved. So if you're at a tech startup, you got to have a lot more of that cushion up front to get it going. And in some cases, be millions of dollars where you can start generating revenue. On the flip side, if you have raised, you got a little bit of money in the bank and you're managing your burn. You don't really have a lot. So you don't ever feel like you've got a whole lot of cushion, but it's a little bit better in some ways. I'm like, spent 3 months without work. Damn, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
You might have a little bit more ability to weather a slightly longer sales cycle. Plus, if people invested in you, if they still believe in what you're doing and they believe it's mostly the sales cycle, they may float you a bit more. Give you another 3, 6 months of runway, not necessarily on great terms, but they may give it to you.
Right.
Whereas a guy that set up his own shingle to be an accountant or your own independent real estate brokerage firm, you don't have that to fall back on.
No, you don't. But I guess on that note, I'm excited for the book to come out. If people are interested in pre-order, it doesn't come out until May 15th, you said.
Yeah. So you've got a couple more weeks to pre-order. And if you do pre-order, there's a couple more slots left. We didn't go into this last time, but part of having done a lot of the curriculum for the Dream It Accelerator program is that I used to give these classes pretty frequently. How do I prospect for investors? Or what's the perfect pitch deck? Or how do I create an effective elevator pitch? And then when Dream It went a little later stage, we didn't need to give that consistently to our startups. I started giving it to other accelerator programs whose startups actually became prospects for us when they were a little bit more mature. And so I started doing it for friends. I started doing it for other accelerators as a bit of deal, but I've never given those courses to the general public. And what I am going to do now is for the first 100 pre-orders, I've set up some time for 5 sessions. People can choose the session they're in. They'll be capped at about 20 people each. And I'm going to give them their choice of the sessions that until very recently you had to be in, say, a Techstars or a Dream program to get. I've got 60 of the slots are already spoken for. So if any of your readers want to do it, number one, order the book. When you get the Amazon confirmation email, forward it to me, Andrew, B as in boy, Ackerman at Gmail, and say, I hope I'm one of the first 100. And if you still are, I'll add you to the list and you'll get to hear what you otherwise would not have had a chance to hear.
That's great. So if they do want to pre-order, it's on Amazon or through your website too, or that's just going to route it to Amazon?
So just for now, just go to Amazon. My personal website is still under construction. It's up there, but not where I want it to be.
Okay.
And you can only pre-order it through Amazon. You can't pre-order it through the publisher yet. So just go to Amazon. As I said in the beginning, paperback version. Don't pay $180 for the hardcover.
All right.
I feel bad if you did that.
Andrew, this has been great. I hope you have a great rest of your day, man.
I already had a great afternoon. Thank you.
That's it for the Stashcast. Subscribe, share, and stay ahead in commercial real estate and prop tech. See you next time.